Pick up your phone. Look at your shoes. Check the tag on your shirt. There's a good chance all three were born in the same country. Not just made there, engineered there, financed there, shipped from there. In 1978, China didn't matter to the global economy. Less than 1% of world trade passed through its hands. It was poor. It was isolated. Most economists didn't even bother studying it. Today, that same country manufactures nearly 1/3 of everything the entire planet consumes. Here's the question that should bother you. Cheap labor wasn't unique to China. India had it. Vietnam had it. Bangladesh had it. So why didn't the world's factories move there instead? Why did Apple stay? Why did Walmart stay? Why, after decades of tariffs, trade wars, and political pressure, can the world still not leave? The answer isn't luck. It's not even really about money. It's a 45-year plan, and most of the world only noticed it was working after it was already too late to stop. This is how one country made itself impossible to replace. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to a man almost nobody outside China had heard of, Deng Xiaoping. In 1978, China was still recovering from decades of rigid state control. Farms were collectivized, factories answered to the government, not the market. Ambition was dangerous. Profit was practically a dirty word. Deng looked at this and made a bet that could have ended his career, or worse. He proposed something radical. Let a small piece of China play by different rules. Let foreign companies invest there. Let market forces, not the state, decide what got built. He needed a testing ground, somewhere small, somewhere expendable if it failed. He chose a fishing village on the border of Hong Kong. Population, barely 30,000 people. Its name was Shenzhen. In 1980, Shenzhen became China's first special economic zone. Inside its borders, foreign companies got tax breaks most countries wouldn't dream of offering. Land was cheap, regulations were light. Export rules were rewritten to make shipping products out of the country as frictionless as possible. For Western corporations, this wasn't just attractive, it was irresistible. Companies like Walmart could source products for a fraction of Western manufacturing costs. Electronics firms could build components at margins that seemed almost unfair to their competitors back home. So they came, slowly at first, then all at once. By the 1990s, Shenzhen had transformed from a farming village into an industrial city, building the guts of the modern electronics industry. Within a few decades, its economy would rival entire developed nations. But here's what almost nobody predicted at the time. Deng's zones weren't just about attracting cheap factories. They were the first move in a much longer game, one designed to make China not just a place where you could manufacture products cheaply, but the only place where you could manufacture them at scale, on time, and at a price nobody else could match. That second part is where the real story begins. Here's a mistake almost every Western business news article makes. They say China won because of cheap labor. That's not wrong, it's just incomplete, and it misses the actual weapon. Picture you're building a smartphone in Shenzhen. You need microchips, you need glass screens, you need tiny screws, plastic casings, batteries, and cardboard packaging. Then you need trucks, shipping containers, and a port to send it all overseas. In Shenzhen, every single one of those things exists within a 30-minute drive. Not 30 days, not 30 hours, 30 minutes. This is called industrial clustering, and it might be the single most underrated force in modern global trade. Here's why it matters so much. If a factory in Vietnam needs a specialized component, it might have to import it from another country entirely. That means weeks of delay, extra tariffs, and shipping costs stacking up before a single product ships. In China's Pearl River Delta, that same component is one phone call and one truck ride away. When you can prototype, source, manufacture, and ship a product in the same afternoon that a competitor is still waiting on a customs form, you're not just cheaper, you're faster. And in modern business, speed is often worth more than price. This didn't happen by accident either. China poured staggering amounts of money into the infrastructure that makes clustering possible. Deep-water ports built to handle some of the largest cargo ships on Earth. High-speed freight rail connecting inland factories to coastal export hubs. A power grid engineered to keep factories running around the clock without the blackouts that plague other developing economies. Competing countries had cheap labor. What they didn't have was the logistics network to turn that labor into speed. And speed, it turns out, is nearly impossible to copy quickly. You can lower wages in a new country almost overnight. You cannot build 40 years of ports, rail lines, and supplier networks in a year. Or 5 years, sometimes not even in a decade. This is the invisible infrastructure that Western companies rarely mention in earnings calls, but it's the real reason factories didn't leave when labor costs in China started to rise. Because by then, leaving didn't just mean losing a cheap workforce, it meant losing the entire machine. Even with Shenzhen booming and clusters forming, China was still missing one critical piece: full, unrestricted access to the world's largest markets. That changed in 2001. That year, China officially joined the World Trade Organization, and almost overnight, the rules of global trade shifted in its favor. Tariffs that once made Chinese goods more expensive in Western markets began dropping. Textile quotas that had limited how much China could export were phased out. Duty exemptions made it dramatically cheaper for foreign companies to import Chinese-made goods. For Western corporations, the incentive became almost impossible to ignore. Move production to China and instantly gain access to lower costs, faster shipping, and now far fewer trade barriers on the way back home. The floodgates opened. Multinational corporations didn't just start ordering products from China, they started building entire supply chains inside it. And in the process, many of them did something they probably didn't fully realize at the time. They traded away decades of technological knowledge in exchange for market access. Manufacturing partnerships often required sharing production techniques, quality processes, and engineering know-how with local partners. In the short term, this looked like a simple cost-saving deal. In the long term, it taught China's factories how to build increasingly sophisticated products. The evolution happened faster than almost anyone predicted. China moved from low-tech manufacturing, cheap textiles, plastics, toys, into high-tech dominance. Solar panels, electric vehicle batteries, smartphones, increasingly advanced robotics. By the 2020s, China wasn't just the world's factory floor for cheap goods. It had become the dominant global source for some of the most technologically advanced products on the planet. The bet Deng Xiaoping made in a fishing village in 1980 had scaled into something no economist in 1978 could have realistically predicted. Which brings us to today. Western governments have started calling it de-risking, bringing manufacturing closer to home, reducing dependence on a single country for critical goods. On paper, it sounds simple. In practice, it's proving almost impossible. Because untangling from China doesn't just mean finding cheaper labor somewhere else. It means rebuilding 45 years of ports, rail lines, supplier networks, and industrial clusters from scratch. Companies that have tried nearshoring to Vietnam or India have discovered a familiar problem. The labor might be cheaper, but the ecosystem isn't there yet. The 30-minute radius doesn't exist. The deep water ports aren't built at the same scale. The supplier density that lets a factory build an entire product without waiting weeks for parts has to be built, cluster by cluster, almost from the ground up. That takes years, sometimes decades, which means for now, and likely for years to come, the world remains locked into a manufacturing relationship it increasingly wants to exit, but structurally cannot. China didn't win by being cheap. It won by making itself the only place on Earth where cheap, fast, and advanced all existed in the same square mile. And that is what 45 years of deliberate infrastructure buys you. So the next time you pick up your phone or check the tag on your shirt, remember this. You're not just looking at a product. You're looking at the largest economic transformation in human history. If you had watched the entire video, you have surely liked the video. You should not miss the next video. Please subscribe and hit the like button.